Hello and welcome to another episode of MLS UK Show Stoppage Time. I'm Henry Hewitt, and as always I'm joined by
Elliot Holman.
So Elliot, it is finally here, MLS Cup week. What a match we're going to have. We're going to talk loads about it, but just Columbus v LAFC. You said on the last podcast how much you've enjoyed watching Columbus. Maybe not when they knocked Orlando out of the playoffs, but for the rest of the season you have LAFC, you know, our LAFC. It's the perfect MLS Cup, isn't it?
Yeah, Columbus in the final, hosting as well. It feels very early MLS UK show era to me. Columbus making MLS Cup. They've been fantastic. They've been fantastic all season. They play the best football for me, soccer. And so absolutely deserve to be in the final. And against LAFC, the West hasn't been as strong, but LAFC are a fantastic side, and this is going to go down in history, this one.
You know what? It could easily. I mean, going off what happened with Cincy and Columbus in the conference final, you know, and LAFC are LAFC. I know we've said it before, but like that's all we can say. They are LAFC. You know, you're going to hear my chat with Jake ZIVIN in a moment, and he says that they've been a bit more pragmatic this season. But on the whole, you know, especially with Boanga up front, LAFC can just turn it on like that. And if they do, they can beat any team. And my prediction, we're going to give our proper predictions at the end of the podcast, but straight away, my prediction, we'll see goals.
I couldn't agree more. I think Boanga for LAFC and Cucho for Columbus are easily two of the best, not just the best strikers in the league, but two of the best players to watch. I really, really, really can't wait for it. I think it's going to be fantastic. And I actually couldn't watch the Columbus Orlando game because I was working at a gig, and I think that's the best outcome for all involved.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, before we hear the chat with Jay, just to cheer you up a little bit, just a reminder, we said we were going on the last episode. We went to Anfield for the Football Content Awards. We picked up silver yet again, which is great, and it was a great night, wasn't it? So we won Best Podcast International Section, the Silver Award, you know, and we got to do it at Anfield as well, which really helped us because it's an hour away from my house, 2 hours away from yours. So as new parents, it meant we could get the award and then sneak off and get home to help our wives with bedtime.
I'm going to be honest, I just snuck off to retrieve said award. I have broken it.
Oh, man. Great start.
But here it is, the silver award.
Well, thankfully we've got a few now. So there's one behind me. If you see on there, yes, there. That's silver. A previous silver one, I think. So yeah, I've kept better care of mine than you have of yours.
I don't even know how that's happened. I think it's just so cold in here. All I did was pick it up. But I can tell you now that it's in two pieces that it's from IKEA, the frame. So,
there you go.
You guys.
No expense spared.
There we go. There we go. It's all in one piece.
Well, that was a highlight of the night. Another highlight of the night was meeting Joe from the 25 for 20 Miami Fusion podcast. He also gave us a scarf each, which was really nice. I've still got it, the Fusion. Check that podcast out; it's really interesting. If you love your history of MLS, you know, check that out because he speaks to people around at the time and fans and stuff like that. It's really interesting. But yeah, when we saw him, he had these two scarves. He was wearing one. And he's like, "Oh, I've brought them for you." And we were like, "Really? No, you don't have to give him these. These are fine." He was like, "No, my wife wants them out of the house. I've brought them for you too."
It's also the only bit of Miami merch I have so far, so thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I think Inter Miami you might not be getting much of that being an Orlando fan, but I think Miami Fusion you can probably appreciate a bit more. But yeah, great to meet Joe. Hopefully we're going to get him on the podcast in next season. But yeah, it was a really good event. Won silver. We're happy with that. So yeah, a nice way to end the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to everybody for voting for us. We've had a crazy year of our MLS UK show family literally doubling. So yeah, thank you for sticking with us throughout what's been a couple of busy periods, and yeah, nice to get a little bit more silverware.
Yeah. Well, speaking of our MLS UK show family doubling, while we go check on our newborns, we're going to play you our chat with the lead play-by-play announcer for Apple TV's MLS Season Pass, Jake ZIVIN. You'll hear Jake this weekend alongside friend of the show, Taylor Twellman, at MLS Cup. He kindly gives some time to us just before he was flying out to Ohio to chat not only about the big game, but also about his introduction into commentary, his soccer pathway through Portland as well, MLS Cup, and then we get to chat to him as well at the end about Phil Neville becoming Portland Timbers manager. So Portland fans, stay tuned for that. So here's what happened when I caught up with Jake ZIVIN.
Elliot Holman, Henry Hewitt, MLS UK show.
Welcome back to the MLS UK show. Now we're just days away from MLS Cup 2023, and I'm delighted to say joining us now is the man who will be in the commentary booth for the big game, Jake ZIVIN. How are you, Jake?
I'm doing great. How are you? How's Manchester?
Cold and wet, and as we discussed before, you're in Portland, and it's very much the same.
Yes, it is I think very similar weather right now. Yeah.
So let's hope. Columbus, you'd imagine it'll be a similar sort of temperature. I don't suppose we're going to get any, LA. If it was in LA, I suppose you'd do different clothing on Saturday.
It'll be all about the game for sure. But it doesn't look terrible. Looks relatively warmer than it could be this time of year. And on Saturday, look, we could be playing this in a snowstorm, but I think it'll be quite temperate. It'll be nice on Saturday.
Yeah, well, we can't wait for the game. We're going to talk a little bit about it in more detail later on in our chat. But first of all, with it being MLS Cup week, how does your week look since you called that amazing game in Cincinnati the weekend?
Oh, yeah, it was thrilling. Straight back home, first flight home to Portland, where I still live with my wife for a couple days. I'm here in Portland as we are talking right now. And in 2 hours, I'll be off to the airport and headed to Columbus. I land late tonight. It's Wednesday night. Then over the next couple of days, it's prepping, right, in all sorts of ways for me personally, and a lot of that prep is already done. But as a group, as a broadcast team, in our meetings with the coaches, with the key players from the games, going to training, and then just all the events around MLS Cup, it's different, right? We have this routine that we do for every game throughout the year. And then you get to this one, and All-Star was similar when Arsenal came to DC in the summer. And then there's just so much happening, right? It goes from kind of zero, like our little crew, to 100, and everybody from the whole American soccer world descends on Columbus, which is fantastic. So can't wait to get out there. It'll be a busy few days, and then can't wait for the game, 4 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday.
Well, I'm doing a bit of digging on you, Jake. I know how much of you're a huge soccer fan, even, back when you was a kid. So this must be you must be in dream world right now.
Yeah, honestly, I am, right? I mean, this would have been for me. Well, first of all, it is a massive career goal. But if you were to ask me when I was in high school, right, like what would be my dream job? First of all, it's the one I'm doing right now. And specifically, that would culminate in calling an MLS Cup, right? For this year, for a global audience, for 107 countries on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Yeah, it still kind of pinched me, right? Like I still, we've been going through this whole season, and it's game to game, game to game, game to game. And when it's over, I think I'll reflect back and just be like, wow, I can't believe that year happened, because it's everything I would have wanted, and it's been that way. It's been a fantastic season. I think both for everything we've done on Apple TV and MLS Season Pass that I'm really proud of, and more importantly, everything that's happened on the field, from Lionel Messi arriving, from the first real Leagues Cup to now, what should be a thrilling final with two great teams, LAFC and Columbus. It's such an intriguing matchup. So, man, yeah, I can't wait. Seriously, it's going to be fantastic.
Well, it has been a great season, hasn't it? All the stuff you've said there. And it's been great for us in the UK because we've actually finally got to hear more than just highlight clips of you commentating. When you was doing Portland, we get the odd bit. And like when Aspilia's bicycle kick, and we got to hear you there. But we haven't really, with the broadcasting, we didn't get to hear that much of you. Yeah. So it's been great hearing you with Taylor. How's it been? Taylor Twellman's been on the show a few times, friend of the show. Okay. But how's it been developing that relationship with him?
Well, first of all, I think I left my voice in Providence Park from that Dyron Espria, but it's still there somewhere around around like 40 yards out from goal, Providence Park, from that Dyron Espria bicycle kick. Taylor's been awesome. We've grown to be, I think, really good friends, and to have what I feel is a good chemistry on air. And to be honest, it came maybe quicker than I thought it would. I knew Taylor. Obviously him and John Champion would come to Portland all the time. And before that, Adrian Healy, when they were the lead play-by-play and analyst voices at ESPN, and Portland is still and was such a prominent part of Major League Soccer. So they'd get a lot of national TV games. They'd get a lot of ESPN games. So I knew Taylor from that, but I hadn't worked with him before and didn't know him intimately. It's been a blast, man. But we have traveled the country. We have been, I wouldn't say planes, trains, and automobiles because it's just been planes, but it's because it's a big country, but it's been planes to stadium, to airport, to stadium. Right. And there's no one I'd rather do it with. It's been a great time with Taylor. That's off air. And then on air, man, I mean, he's a powerhouse on there, right? His energy, it is infectious. It makes everybody bring up their own game because he's at this top level. But he also knows when not to talk, right? I mean, he's not just at 100 miles an hour the whole game. But when he comes in, he's fantastic. He knows what to say. He knows how to say it. And he's so good at just the nuances of television. And I've learned so much from him in that regard on air as well.
Obviously now you both have not only become a staple of the MLS coverage here in the UK with Apple TV, but you as well have probably become the most listened to bit of commentary of 2023 with that Lionel Messi goal. Do you ever sit back and think about that? Has it had more than 100 million views now on socials?
Man, so I was just on Sirius XM here in the States, and literally 15 minutes ago was asked the same question. We haven't had a lot of time to sit back because from Leagues Cup, it went straight into the resumption of the MLS regular season and straight into the playoffs. And it's just been so focused on the next game. I realize I'm sounding like a player right now or a coach right now, right? Just the next game. But the reality of what our schedule has been this year is we've had to do that. But it's cool, man. Like it's a big honor is what I'll say, to be able to have been on the call for that. Right place, right time, so to speak. When you throw out that number, that's a bit like overwhelming in a way, still, which I think was my reaction initially, but not in a bad way. I have someone who loves this league and has since I was a young child, since the league started when I was 10 years old. So to be able to be on the call for a moment like that will, and even though it wasn't in MLS, right, but for an MLS team in Leagues Cup, it was his basically, debut in MLS, so to speak, without being, just a huge honor. And, I just hope that we brought that, not me, but I hope that the whole production brought that moment to the viewers in an appropriate way. And I think we did. And that isn't about me. That's about, Taylor not jumping right in, right? And not both of us laying out for a minute and a half. It's about our director, Jim Dodonna, cutting around that stadium in such a fantastic way to get the shot of Messi hugging his kids on the touchline right after the goal. It's about our producer for that game, Shaw Brown, having the restraint to stay there and stay with the images on the field and not go directly to a replay, because in that moment, that's what we needed. We needed to soak that in for minutes. So yeah, I'm proud holistically of how the crew covered that. And I hope 100 million people enjoyed it, because we sure did.
Well, I've got to say, actually, this is off what I was going to ask you, but you just reminded me that when I was watching the Cincinnati-Columbus game at the weekend, the way that when Columbus got the goal, the third goal, it hit me at the time. You paused, you stopped, you let us hear the crowd. And I thought, brilliant piece of commentary. So I've got to point that out.
Thanks. I think that's first of all, it's my style. And I think it's kind of an American style, right? I mean, if you're watching a big college football game, which is kind of, college football is, I think, America's closest equivalent to the passion and the regional tribalism. I say that in a positive way. I use that word in a positive way, that soccer is around the globe. And if you watch a big game and there's a big touchdown and then lay out, right? And just let it all come in. And so, yeah, that's our style. For me, that's what I like. It's not everybody's style, but it's a viewer that I want to be taken there, right? I want to be in that environment, in that emotion. And maybe you hear maybe the players are close enough to a camera that you can hear them. I mean, I look back to the Western Conference semi in Seattle, and Denis Bouanga scores the only goal of that game. And he's coming towards the camera, and Taylor and I have laid out, and you can hear him yelling, right? In that stadium that's gone quiet of 35,000 in Lumen Field. Like, for me, that's good television, right? As a viewer, that's what I want to hear. I don't need to hear me, myself, or Taylor in that moment. I want to hear Denis Bouanga, right, yelling at a camera, and LAFC yelling in a silent stadium.
I mean, obviously you called that very well. You called the Messi goal very well, but just a thought on, your life as a commentator, maybe the afterthoughts you have. Do you ever, because us regular people, we'll have a conversation with someone, or we'll have an argument with someone, and we'll go afterwards, oh, I should have said that, or we should have said that. Do you ever get that as a commentator? Do you ever think later on, oh, I should have said that, and then maybe save it for that person's next goal?
Yeah, everything I say, I think, that comes out of my mouth, I'm second guessing constantly. No, yeah, I'm a harsh self-critic. So of course, there are some moments, very few, that I'm like, yeah, I don't know that I would change anything there. But for most goal calls, for most anything, I think, my voice went a little up when I wish it had gone down, right? Or I got a little out of the vocal range, or, even in the Eastern Conference Final, I was happy with my goal call for Diego Rossi, which wasn't planned. That the crew has been saved, which is Save the Crew was this movement a few years ago when Anthony Precourt was trying to move them to Austin, and eventually, it was worked out where he got a team in Austin and the crew stayed. And then I had that came off kind of the top of the head. I mean, not that that's an original saying, but then the next goal, Christian Ramirez, I had thought in a previous game that we did, because his nickname was Superman for Minnesota United. And I thought, all right, if he scores a late goal, I'll go something off the lines of like, here I come to save the day, right? Like Superman, here I come to save the day. So I kind of did a variation of that. And then I said, I'm like, oh, I just said saved 20 minutes ago when Rossi scored the goal. Now I'm saying both calls are similar, and that's not great. So yeah, second guess myself then. But I think in this business, you learn it's kind of like being a player, like being a goalkeeper in a lot of ways. You've got to move on. You've got to wipe away. If you didn't like what you did, you can't let that hang with you for the rest of the game, but also to learn from it. I've always felt that the best way to get better as a commentator is to listen to yourself back. And that can be uncomfortable. I hate listening to myself back for the most part, especially when I do something I don't like. It's just total cringe. But that's the way to get better, is to listen back, is to cringe, realize why you cringed. And then over time, you'll ideally not do those things that made you cringe.
Hey, well, if it's any consolation, us regular Joes, we didn't notice. So obviously you're your own harshest critic, but we the viewers didn't notice. Right, well, let's go back to the start then, because you're in Portland at the moment, but you're not from Portland. You're from Illinois. Obviously, Chicago Fire's home state. What's your earliest memories of MLS? Because you've been a soccer fan right from the very start, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I'm of a generation in America where a lot of us started playing when we were 5 years old. Rec soccer, AYSO is what it was in the Chicago area. And just as we would play Little League, which is, young kids playing baseball, or basketball for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, or flag football, American football, it was very common to play soccer in my generation, and maybe kind of the first generation where it was kind of ubiquitous. Like every kid in the town played. And for me, it was my favorite sport. I just enjoyed it the most. I was the best at it, which is saying nothing. It's very relative to my own athletic ability, which is very poor. But I was slightly better at it than other sports. And it was around the time when the World Cup was going to come to the US. And we didn't have a league. And then MLS, when I was 10, MLS started. I distinctly remember where I was watching Eric Winalda's goal, the first goal in MLS history for the San Jose Clash. I really remember where I was for the first ever MLS Cup. I was at my uncle's 40th birthday party in Greenwich Village. I was 11, and all the adults are having a great time in this beautiful loft apartment in the village, like the hippest place in the world. My uncle's a really hip guy. And I'm in the back room, in the bedroom, sitting on the bed watching the first ever MLS Cup, and Eddie Pope scored that golden goal in a rainstorm for DC United. Then the Fire came into the league 2 years later. I'm a young kid from Chicago. We had Michael Jordan. We had the Bulls. Like, I didn't get why the Fire weren't a team in 1996 when the league started. Why did it take till year 3? I'm 10. I don't understand that sports business stuff. So I was really glad when they came. Remember with my friends in the lunchroom, like mocking up what we thought the logo would be when it was announced a team would come. And then going to games at Soldier Field. I was at the Western Conference final that year, which was the last home game for them. It was a best of 3 series, which we brought back this year. And the Fire won it in an old MLS style shootout from 35 yards away. They won that game against the Galaxy, game 2 in a shootout, which was their second win of the best of 3 series. They advanced to MLS Cup where they won, where they beat DC at the Rose Bowl. So yeah, diehard Fire fan my whole life growing up. And then that kind of morphed into just the league as a whole. I interned for Major League Soccer when I was in college. And that kind of turned my focus from, okay, I'm a fan, right? Fire fanatic of the Fire, to being like, oh yeah, I want to do this I wanted to make this my career. I love this league. I love the sport in this country. And if I could do this as a career and parlay that passion into a job, that'd be ideal. And feel so lucky and fortunate that I've been able to do that.
Well, I think most people there won't be like, oh, wow, you've got to do this, your job that you really wanted. It was your dream. Most people will be going, wow, you saw one of those penalty shootouts live?
Oh, they were great. Me and my friends used to just do them messing around. So I was a goalkeeper growing up, and I stopped growing at 5'8", and that ended my career. But as a goalkeeper, I loved it. Like, it was fun. And so we would just mess around after like our club soccer practice or our AYSO practice or high school soccer practice, just doing the shootouts on each other because they were fun. So yeah, man, they were great to watch and they were really fun to compete in. For me, more fun than the nerves of the traditional penalty shootout. So I'm not necessarily advocating for them to come back, but they were enjoyable. I'll say that.
Right, just before we talk about MLS Cup, I need to ask you, you've mentioned there about interning for MLS, and yeah. I believe one of your jobs was you were the guy that would change the score on the screens. Now,
that's right.
This is a proper geeky question from me.
Okay.
However, we all see it. We all obviously know it happens. We know that some person there has to change the score. You're the first person I've ever spoke to that has actually said, yeah, that was my job. What is it as simple as pressing like goal, or is there actually more stuff that goes into it?
So no, I mean, for that actual action, it's just +1 on the bug. We call it the bug in the business. Now there's more to it. And back then there was even more to it. So it was 2005, 2006, the ESPN, it was on ESPN2, MLS Soccer Saturday. Ironically, or maybe not ironically, appropriately, Taylor Twellman was scoring a boatload of goals. I was +1. Oh, Taylor scored another goal, +1. I wish I knew him back then as I did now, because I would have been a little delayed on that. I would have said, let's make him sweat. Maybe it was offside. Maybe the flag's up. No. But there was a lot more to what we would call the bug. We had sponsors, right? So every 5 minutes you'd have a different sponsor that would come through. And the most important part of that job was making sure that sponsor changed every 5 minutes. Because of course, a sport without commercials, which in America is unique, the commercials right during the action, that was a big part of the business of soccer on television. We'd run billboards off it, which means the whole thing would morph into like 3 different company logos. And Rob Stone, who was the play-by-play commentator at the time, would read through them, and I'd advance each one in sync with what Rob was saying. And then we would drop stats off it as well. And you do see that now in every American sport. But it seemed to me like soccer innovated a lot of that, because unlike an American football, a basketball, or a baseball, it's hard to do a close-up shot of a player. And if you would put in, let's say, a graphic of this player has scored 30 points per game, if we're talking basketball, you don't do that over, you don't do a lower third, right, over a wide shot. The director has to get tight in on that player, put up the lower third. They could talk about it for 5 seconds and you come back. Well, the ball needs to not be in play to do that. And so it's very hard in a soccer game to do that, because the ball's pretty much always in play. So the solution for that is you drop smaller nuggets off of the scoreboard. And so a lot of the job was also that, right? Putting little stats. If the commentators were talking about a stat and I had that kind of built into my area, I could sell it to the producer. Hey, I've got that. He would say, okay, drop it. It'd come down off the board so people could read, and it would go with what the announcers were talking about. Then it'd come back up and we wouldn't disrupt being able to actually watch the game.
Well, with all that going on, I'm surprised that you actually remembered to press +1 on, because there seems so much you had to do.
Yeah. I mean, I said I said that the sponsors were the most important part of the job, but hey, look, ultimately it's the goals, right? This is a game that's all about the moment. So no, it was a blast. Look, I really believe that if you want to go into being an on-air commentator, that spending some time in a production truck is extremely helpful, because you understand everything that's going on the broadcast. And there's so much, it takes so much to put together one of these broadcasts, so many people and so many different roles and different elements, that to have the awareness of what everybody's doing really helps you when you're on the air. And you'll understand if something's not happening as fast as you think it should or want it to be, or a viewer might want it to be. You have some empathy as to why that is, and you can help problem solve it if in our role, if we can, or maybe just avoid going somewhere, right? So we don't make it look like a bigger problem than it is. All of those things, I think it's important.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to put you under pressure, but there's obviously no bigger game than MLS Cup, which is this weekend. Not only you guys under pressure, but also the players as well. Although Columbus, I guess, recently have been playing as if they're not under any pressure at all. How excited are you to watch them, and how excited have you been watching them in recent weeks?
Yeah, Wilfried Nancy, he has them playing without fear, right? And I think when I say without fear, it's not really a fear of the opponent. It's without a fear of making a mistake. And that's what he wants. You've talked to him from the beginning, and he will talk so eloquently about how he wants his team to play and how he wants his players to do things that make them uncomfortable and to take risks. He plays with three in the back, two wingbacks the wingbacks are both converted attacking players, and the three center backs, the one in the middle, Rudy Camacho, is a traditional center back. The two on either side of him are converted outside backs, and they go and they have the license and the freedom, not the wingbacks, the two center backs next to Camacho, they go. And it's rare. You don't see teams, especially in MLS, be as aggressive as Columbus are. But they are now all so bought in, and they are so confident in themselves and in their style, that it's fascinating to watch. And it's going to make for me an extremely exciting game, because LAFC, a team that we've thought of over the past 5 or 6 years as being maybe the most progressive and aggressive attacking team in Major League Soccer, have dialed that back completely in these playoffs. They had less than 30% possession against Houston, the lowest possession and the fewest number of passes in a game in LAFC history, by design. And they were totally comfortable. Very similar game plan in Seattle the week before. And they win 2-0, and they don't feel that threatened, and they look really good defensively. And then they're a team that can just take advantage of moments, especially in transition, maybe better than anybody else. So we've got this Columbus team that we know is going to want to have the ball the whole game, highest possession in the league. We've got an LAFC team that in the playoffs have decided to not have the ball. And LAFC has the Golden Boot winner, Denis Bouanga, who's the most dangerous player in transition in this league. You've got a Columbus team that's so aggressive with everybody going forward. It could work out great for Columbus. It could also be a disaster for Columbus, because Bouanga's going the other way. And the same for LAFC, because if they let Columbus have the ball for 70% of the game, that could backfire too. So it's a fascinating tactical matchup. And assuming that that's how both teams come out and decide to play an MLS Cup, Columbus is going to. We know that. They don't compromise for anybody. There's no doubt about that. We'll see what Steve Cherundolo and LAFC decide to do. It should make for a great game and a really interesting one as well.
Yeah, because it's funny, isn't it? When you compare LAFC to last season, it's as if the switch roles. LAFC were in the ascendancy last year within the playoffs. We are the best team. We're not going to stop for anyone. Yet this year, do you think it's because they've played more matches away? Have they had to adjust? And do you think that out of all the teams in the West, if anyone's going to spoil the party at Columbus, it's going to be LAFC? It's
interesting. I don't know. And I look forward to sitting down with Steve Cherundolo in a couple of days and asking him, what prompted this. My sense is, especially early in the season, they played a lot of games, just volume. They played the most games of any team in MLS history in a calendar year. They made a run to the CONCACAF Champions League final, as it was then known, tournament now known as the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They had to play a Campeones Cup. They won a game in the Open Cup. They had a bye in the group stage of the Leagues Cup, which saved them 3 games. But still, this team by June were exhausted. And they looked, for the first 2 months of the season, they looked unbeatable. They looked like they were going to win 6 trophies, which is what they could have won. They were competing for 6 trophies. But by that CCL final, they looked dead. They had injuries, little injuries, nothing significant, but they just looked tired, heavy legs, because they played so many games, more games than any team in league history before, that date as well. And again, as I said, that's continued. So maybe that's what it was. It was just like, look, from a practical standpoint, we have to be pragmatic and we have to save our legs. You've got a Carlos Vela who's getting a little older and he's still contributing, but maybe can't do as much work as he could in the past. Obviously never a workhorse of a player, Carlos Vela, but he doesn't quite have maybe the pace and that he used to, but he's still incredibly talented and clever, and can contribute and has contributed for them. You've got Chiellini who didn't start in the playoff run last year, right? It wasn't Chiellini. And now they've gone to Chiellini, and he's the oldest player in the league. He's 39. He looks there, to be honest, and he's so smart. But he's 39 years old. So, right, there's some reality there too with how you're going to play. But it's been an interesting transition, and it's been going this way. I'll say that Steve Cherundolo brought a lot more pragmatism to LAFC, whereas Bob Bradley was go, 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 and they took the league by storm, right? But they win MLS Cup being a little more pragmatic last year, and now they're back in it being super pragmatic this year. It'll be interesting how they come out on Saturday.
So if they do win, they'll become the first team since 2012 to retain MLS Cup. I mean, you've mentioned a whole host of reasons there with the amount of games being played, why teams might not have done it before. But does this show how unique MLS is? When you look at Europe, there's always teams dominating certain leagues. Is that what's special about MLS, is that we don't get the same team winning it every year? Yeah,
right. I mean, definitely. It's very American. Our leagues are leagues of competitive balance for the most part. In the NFL, not all 32 teams, but most teams don't feel like they're that far away from winning a Super Bowl, right? Like I'm a Chicago Bears fan. I was 6 months old when they last won the Super Bowl in the 1985 season, and they've made it to one in my lifetime, and they've otherwise been terrible. But you know what? A couple good draft picks, a couple good free agent signings, they can do it. That's how the league is set up, right? If you're a fan, obviously in England in the Premier League, the exception is Leicester, and that's it. Like that's the exception. Otherwise, if you're not a supporter of a top 4, maybe 6, maybe team, you really don't have a lot of hope of winning the league, do you? Like you don't. And so it's just the way our sports are set up here in America. As an American who grew up being used to this with baseball, with football, American football, with basketball, I like it. I like the unpredictability of it. I like that, if you're right now a Toronto FC fan who were terrible this year, but they spent the most money of any team in the league, like they could win it next year. I mean, they've got a lot to fix, but they could, right? And there's not a lot of other leagues around the world that can say that. And I find that interesting and I like it personally. But I understand if for others, they see that as a negative.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a positive to us on the MLS UK show.
Yeah.
As great as the English league is and as great as other European leagues are, it does get a bit predictable at times. So the fact that with MLS, you can say, oh, well, Toronto definitely win it. And then they finish bottom.
Right.
And,
exactly. Exactly. They signed Insigne and Bernadeschi and finished bottom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's issues for that, but still, there's reasons for that, but still, it makes it interesting at the least.
So go on then. A prediction then for MLS Cup.
Nah, I don't predict
LAFC.
games. I don't predict games that I call. It's my principle. However, I do think it's going to be a great game, right? I think this is a matchup that when the brackets, as we call it, right, came out after decision day, when you saw where everybody lined up, who made the playoffs, I think this is the game that a neutral would have said, that's the one I want to watch, right? You've got Columbus, the most interesting attacking team in the league. You've got LAFC, the defending champs, with the Golden Boot winner, and still maybe the biggest characters and the biggest name just as a club right now in the league, Inter Miami and Lionel Messi aside, right? This is the one. This is the matchup. So Yeah, I can't wait to call it. I think it's going to be a great game. It's been a thrilling playoff so far. And if we get anything like we got in Ohio on last Saturday, man, like strap in, giddy up, because it's going to be fantastic theater.
Yeah, we can't wait to watch it. We can't wait to hear you call it as well. Now, just before you get your flight to Columbus, I've got to ask you. Your name is and your voice is synonymous with the Portland Timbers. Portland fans won't forgive me if I talk to you a little bit about them. You've spent some time with Phil Neville. We saw you had a chat with him when he was appointed. It's been a poor season for Portland, hasn't it, with the high standards? How do you think Phil will do, and what are your expectations from next year?
Yeah, look, it's been two seasons in a row not making the playoffs for the Timbers. First time that's happened since the first 2 years of the Timbers' existence in Major League Soccer. And as you said, it's a club that has really high expectations and a fan base that has extraordinarily high expectations, as they should, and as the club should. It's a club that's been so successful. They've been to 3 MLS Cups since 2015. So to miss the playoffs 2 years in a row, of course, is a disappointment. I'm really interested to see what Phil Neville brings to this club. And for the main reason that this is kind of the first time, at least on a club level, that Phil Neville has had a fresh start. Kind of, fresh start's the wrong word, a clean slate, right? An even playing field. In Miami, they had the sanctions. And then at the beginning of this year, a roster that had no depth for many reasons. One, because of the sanctions. Two, because the roster was preparing for a possibility of Lionel Messi signing in the summer and having maximum flexibility in that summer transfer window to add not just Lionel Messi, but Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, Facundo Farias, Tomas Aviles, Diego Gomez, and completely transform the roster. Well, Phil Neville didn't get to coach that team. He coached, the team that was without those 6 guys. And when John Mota and Gregory went down, it was just a depleted roster and again, not really an even playing field. So for the first time in his career in MLS, at least, Phil Neville has an even playing field. He has an ownership and a front office that has always shown an ability to put resources into the club to help the team win. They've got open designated player spots, very important signings coming up. For me, it's about Evander. And if Phil Neville can get Evander to be the type of player that everybody expected he was when he signed, and the type of player that was a Champions League level midfielder for Midtjylland in Denmark, then I think that the Timbers will be back to where they've been. I think if you're Portland, the model that you want for Evander is Hani Mukhtar. Came from the same league, and his first year wasn't great. It was the pandemic year, so it was different from off the field, on the field, difficult year to adjust. But it was the second year that Hani popped in Nashville and is now, obviously the last year's MVP and one of the best players in the league. If Evander can make that same jump in his second year that Hani Mukhtar did in Nashville, then the Timbers are right back there contending for the Western Conference title and contending for an MLS Cup. And to me, that's Phil Neville's number one task is getting that out of Evander.
Well, we'll get to see next year whether that comes off, whether Evander can start scoring and Phil Neville can take Portland to the playoffs. But for now, our concentration is on MLS Cup this weekend. Yeah. Jake, thanks so much for joining us on the MLS UK show. Good luck. You don't need it, but good luck from us. And also say hi to Taylor from us as well. He's been on the show twice, so we'll have to get you on again so you can match up with him.
Would love to anytime. Great to chat, Henry. And thank you for saying good luck. I do need the luck. So yeah, I'll take it. I'll take anything I can get.
The MLS UK show.
So there we go. That was my chat with Jake ZIVIN. Thanks, Jake, and thanks for MLS and Apple TV for sorting that out. It was great to chat to him. Remember, he will be on air at MLS Cup this weekend, this Saturday. The match kicks off at 4:10 Eastern time. The countdown show kicks off at 3 o'clock. Make sure I've got that right. Yeah, 3 o'clock Eastern time, which is great for us in the UK because that means it's 8 o'clock here in the evening. I love MLS Cup because they always play it at a good time for us in the UK.
It's the only game all season that you can go, I actually don't need to make any arrangements for this. I can just sit and watch it. Like, this is fantastic. I understand that's what happens when you get into a league that's on the other side of the world. But all season, until that Orlando game that I couldn't watch in the Columbus-Orlando game in the playoffs, until that moment, there was barely any early kickoffs all season. But finally, MLS Cup is here, and this is going to be an epic one.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for it, and you can watch the game for free on MLS Season Pass through Apple TV and tv.apple.com. So everyone should watch it, if you get the opportunity, because if there's a game to sell MLS, it's going to be this game. Columbus Crew play soccer like it's going out of fashion. They're playing soccer like it's the last game they're ever going to play, which is great to see. We saw it in the conference final against Cincinnati, 2-0 down, come back, win 3-2. It's never over with Columbus Crew. But if there's a team, as I said then with Jay, if there's a team to spoil the party, it's LAFC, isn't it?
LAFC, if they win it, I think if you look at the start of the season and you say, oh, LAFC are going to win MLS Cup, you'd be like, that's a bit predictable. That's a bit boring. But that's not really been my thought all season. Like, they're a good side. But there's been a couple of sides in the East that have been better. I think that's fair. I think maybe the top 4 or 5 teams in the East have been better. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. Next season, the West might be really strong again. But I think it would have looked like a bit of an anticlimax. But actually, they've kind of would have come from, although they won the West, it feels like they're coming from deep, which is really bizarre because the East has been so far ahead.
Yeah, it has. And, I think it's such a change from last season because you maybe looked at last season. And I think the East has been getting better over the last few seasons. But last season you look and go, oh, well, the West is the stronger, and LAFC came from that. And, as Jake said there, LAFC have had their own issues this season. The amount of games they've played has obviously affected them. They've come out the other side. They're playing well going into MLS Cup. And, I think all the attention has been on the East, with the likes of Cincinnati, with Columbus, with Orlando doing well as well, with what's going on with Miami and Toronto. So all the attention has been on the East. LAFC have just quietly been going around the business, haven't they? They've not been, beating teams 5 or 6-0. They've not been putting in amazing performances. They've just been getting the job done, which is a good trait to have going into MLS Cup because, you look at that stadium with Columbus, it's the first truly massive event for Columbus Crew at the stadium. It's going to be a great atmosphere. It's going to be a great day. But, and ironically with Jake being on the show, when you think of like Portland hosting NYCFC and then losing, it's all right to have this great show. It's all right to have a very partisan crowd, this great party, but you have to go and win the game. Portland didn't. They lost on penalties. Columbus Crew, this could either be one of the best days in their history or it could be a massive anticlimax.
And when you think about that Portland game off the field, what's the first thing that you think of that comes to your mind?
I feel about all I remember from that is those people who were lucky enough to have a gym membership and watch the game for free.
Yeah, literally, whenever I think about that MLS Cup final in Portland, it's those people in that gym. That overrides everything. I remember watching it so clearly. I was in Blackpool. It was a terrible weekend, all in all, but I enjoyed watching MLS Cup. And I just think, actually, that hopefully there'll be enough going on the field that we won't be distracted by something as stupid as that. But it just should be so good. It really should be so good. How do you feel about them moving to a neutral stadium? Like, if America built themselves a US men's national team stadium, US women's national team stadium, and had MLS Cup there, how would you feel about that?
It would even things up, but I do feel that it's different in this country because you will the fans will travel a lot more. So, obviously I'm in the north of England. Wembley, London is, a 4-hour drive away or 2 hours on a train. And Bolton played there in April and we took 30,000 fans. People are expected to travel, whereas if it's in MLS Cup and MLS, if you build it in New York, for example, are LA fans gonna, in the numbers that they would have for a home game, or Columbus fans, the numbers that are going to be there, would they travel to New York? Probably not. So I think for me, some of the atmosphere, like LA last year, LAFC, Portland we've mentioned, when Columbus have held it, apart from the COVID year when there were like 4,000 people there or whatever it was. But whenever we've seen it, Seattle when they've hosted it, Toronto, it's been a great atmosphere. And people do travel. There is a bit, quite a few away fans there as well. So I think for me, keep it as it is. I mean, would you disagree with that, or what do you think?
No, I think the home advantage thing is really nice. It gives you something to play for throughout the whole season. Even when you've reached the playoffs, that's what you want. You want to finish in those top spots. I'm interested that in your example of where to put the national team stadium, you chose New York. They can't even get a stadium for the club.
Yeah,
there's no space.
If there was something to annoy NYCFC fans, that would be it. Yeah, we'd have to. I don't know. They'd have to have it in like what is it? Football Heritage, maybe Portland or somewhere like that. But yeah, that's a very good point. So this weekend, then obviously MLS Cup, Columbus v LAFC. We love making a prediction on this show, and normally we're wrong. But to try and change the habit of a lifetime, Elliot, go on. What's your prediction for this weekend?
Columbus to play the beautiful football, but it to finish 1-1, and Columbus to win 2-1 overall.
Ooh, okay. I can see it being a 3-2. I think it'll be very close. Which side that third goal goes to? You know what? There's a part of me that there's half of me that loves when the home team wins MLS Cup because it's a great sort of occasion. You get that feel to it. There's also half of me that loves when that sort of pantomime villain kind of, when the away team wins, like New York City FC did in Portland, when it's like in an empty stadium. I also love that as well. So, you know what? I think Columbus, after the years they've had, this is a real full stop marker to all of that, and it's like, right, this is now the time to move on fully, and I think it'll be a nice party for them if they were to win. So I'm going with Columbus to win. Just a point though on Columbus, right? I may have said it at the start of the season, definitely thought it. Wilfred Nancy has done an incredible job, and I didn't think he would do well. After the success at Montreal, I thought, all right, he's going to move and it's going to be a bit of he should have stayed at Montreal. The guy has just been incredible. So I've got to hold my hands up and say I was wrong. Whether I publicly said it or not, I was wrong with that one.
I think the roster's kind of set up really nicely for the way he wants to play, because you've got these tricky players that can do the tiki-taka football, but also you just got Nagby. He's just still doing bits. Like, the man's incredible. Literally, just belongs in any MLS Cup final that you should ever watch. I just feel, it just feels that way. But I really, really hope that he can not just keep that roster together, but maybe add a couple of pieces that really work with the way that he wants to play, and they'll be unstoppable. They're so good to watch. They really are.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see him this weekend. MLS Cup, don't forget, it's on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV+. It kicks off at 4:10 Eastern Time, 8:10, 9 here in the UK. Don't know what it works out to be. Anyway, it's not in the middle of the night, which we're just thankful for. So I can't wait to watch it. Just before we go, Elliot, one last thing. I noticed former Norwich manager Dean Smith's been linked with Charlotte. Would you like to see him in MLS?
I know his son. Is it his son? Plays in America. Good luck to him. Good luck.
Is that we like Charlotte too much to have that put on them?
I don't know. This I think is the best way that I can sum it up. I don't know what his philosophy is. And so I can't tell you what he would try to do or how he would try to play. Like, we've just been talking about Nancy, who is just incredible. And he's got an exact style of play that he wants to implement. I don't know what Dean Smith's is. He was at Norwich for like 18 months or something. I don't know. Is there someone I dislike more in the history of Norwich? Probably not.
Wow. Okay. So here's a big thumbs down from Elliot on that. Let's see. Frank Lampard's also up for it. Maybe it's a job for Frank Lampard. We need we've got, Rooney's gone. We need a Lampard, one of these great England players to go. Oh, Phil Neville's there. So I guess he was a good England player. Right, let's move on from that. A big thanks to our sponsor, not only for this episode, but also for the season as well, soccer90.com. They've been with us a few years now. Such a great outlet, especially if you're an MLS fan or a fan of European soccer as well, international soccer. They've got loads of shirts on there, some other stuff as well. If you go to soccer90.com, they're based out of Dallas, the Hall of Fame, Soccer Hall of Fame, which is... It is such a great, as I said, great outlet. We enjoy working with them. And if you go to their website, if you want a bit of a discount as well, courtesy of ourselves and Soccer90, then type in MLS UK at the checkout. You get 20% off. Right, that's it from today for today's show. This is it for our MLS Cup preview. If you've enjoyed the episode, you watch it on YouTube, then please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments on all of our videos because it helps put them in other people's search feeds. If you listen on your podcast provider, then if you're going to leave a rating, there's one rule and one rule only.
LA Galaxy style, 5 stars only.
Yep, which will continue into next season and possibly the season after that as well, unless LA Galaxy
getting towards LAFC style.
It is, yeah, and they'll be free off if they win this weekend. Right, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back with our MLS 2023 review show before Christmas. But until then, I've been Henry Hewitt.
And I've been Elliot Holman.
See ya.